write
That's
things
what
down, or even take pictures like I do.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Lorelines, our broke-ass stream. Sorry about the time confusion. Um, I was trying to test the scene and absent-mindedly changed it before, you know, figuring out what I was. Oh, wait, we were live. The chat is still kind of wonky and broken. The Fujis don't work, the little avatars. And so we're just going to keep diving right in like we've been doing. We're joined today with Yumi and Meowth. How are you two doing today?
Hello.
Hi.
Hi,
Yumi
that's
first.
it.
When did we break this? How long ago did we break this?
This broke with 7.2.
That makes sense. The world is broken. Time doesn't. The time and the timelines are collapsing onto themselves. We're
I would say more of it's a game bug that kind of translated to real life, but
Yep. So, this week we had Cosmic Exploration come out. I've been buried in that. AC. Go ahead.
I have not been playing 14 much at all. My new current obsession is Claire Obscure Expedition 33.
I've seen people.
I have no idea what
mentioning
that
the
is.
game.
Imagine Type Zero except French.
That's interesting. I will say that much.
It is. It is very good and very sad at the same time. I explained it to others as Depression the game.
I
Okay.
like that. That sounds like things that I pay for.
So like Final Fantasy 13 tracks.
More Type Zero. Not 13, but
True.
Type Zero.
Well, Type Zero is from Loma Crystal. It's pretty much down.
I would say it leans more, not towards 13, but Type Zero. In terms of how it is.
Type Zero is phenomenal, so it works as well.
AC in chat says they saw the recent video we did with Synotic about Hermes. It was fun. Yes, it was. It was a really good time making that. So, Meowth, what have you been up to?
Ooh, the usual. I've been doing more research into really abstract and madcap esoteric things. I found a gold mine in YouTube that, of course, maybe at some point I will tell you guys, be like, look at this thing from this minute and this minute, because it's relevant. But yeah, as usual, I'm not going to start rambling on that unless there's
You already
a
have.
point. But overall, keep working. I keep working on my secret project soonish. I'm almost there. It's still like a bit of work in there, but looking forward to the release. And
Secret project, meaning she got hired by Square Enix to make some cover art.
There's an NDA, everything.
I wish, but no. Though the project is in a sense like I would like it to be like a gift, a thank you gift to them in a sense. Like, hey, there's people listening to what you're trying to say. But otherwise, but I'm not going to give.
Are you trying to make them say, "Wow, you guys are really paying attention"?
Yes.
Yumi's triggered.
No. So this was talked about before the show, so I'm like, okay, so nothing new then. Meowth is just doing her thing.
Yep. So last week we had gotten through the dungeon. I was surprised. It actually took us most of the episode to get through the dungeon and the Beatrix fight. And then we decided to table discussion until this week because we have a whole can of worms that we opened up with the lore dump right after the dungeon. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to that screen. There we go.
Irked me.
You can pray that I'm not going into the visuals of the trial, because that's going into the explicit territory that I'm like,
Don't you have a channel, Meowth?
No.
Yes, you do.
Yes, you absolutely do. You play Pokemon on it all the time.
No.
And you also do lore playthroughs with one of our Discord members?
Nah, not really. Like, my Twitch channel is pretty much dead, and even more so with the whole Twitch limit. But anyways.
Meowth, that's like a kind way of saying, I'm not very popular, you guys can ignore me.
Well, that's true.
If anyone is new, Meowth is the mascot.
Yeah.
She's our mascot. And she's actually the whole reason this group exists. So.
No. Yeah. No. I mean, I just made a comment and you guys roll with it.
Yeah, but you do it a lot, and it always leads to us streaming and broadcasting, so we're getting the blame.
Calm down, Meowth. Anyways.
Me? I mean, calm down. I'm just laughing.
Is it just me, or Mouth sounds really far away?
No, Meowth is fine.
Okay.
Am I better right now?
Yes, you're fine now.
Okay.
So, we had talked about this scene briefly.
Right.
We didn't really dive into it. It's up on screen.
No, yeah, we stopped right here.
Yep.
I believe, why did you so oppose our objectives? And then the next scene was the part where we kind of went, okay,
we
hold
have
on.
to dissect this.
So, let's... with the key, we would be able to harvest ether from other reflections and bring forth more endless.
And that one kind of stuck out to me too, because he specifically mentioned reflections in addition to the key itself and endless. We already know his objective is getting the key and bringing forth more endless, but he specifically mentioned reflections. So that was a red flag to me, like, wait, how do you know all this?
Mm-hmm.
We are the only ones. We are the only ones who, as we know so far, privy to them. And so, yes, we can theorize that, the Asians visited the other reflections and gave them the knowledge of it. That's a theory in general, but it could be that they visited other reflections themselves and know the ins and outs of interdimensional travel too. So,
Well, we do know two things. One, it's not necessary for Ascian involvement to know about the reflections because we know the Alligans.
that's what I said.
Yeah.
It's they could have had Ascian involvement, or they could have
Yeah.
themselves devised a way to travel to other reflections, interdimensional travel,
Right.
and discovered
So-
the means of it.
We know the Alligans could detect the
ultra-
reflections. We know mages can open portals to the void. And there have been instances of
the alternate timeline folks, they actually
Yeah.
did.
Mm-hmm.
Not just shard reflection, time travel through shard reflection, timeline travel.
Right.
So that's a massive important thing because
Now-
you guys mentioned only us so far should know the reflections. What if it is our side? What's actually at play?
This line actually
ahead, Cobb.
brought me a great deal of relief because instead of saying, any kind of clarification of, multiverse reflections or, other worlds, him saying specifically reflections means that we're still dealing with our timeline, which made me really happy because I don't want to deal with multiverse stuff yet.
Not yet.
Yet.
No. No.
Yet. But
let's-
still, when we come to the next line, I will speak about things that will have to do with
the next
with
line.
intuitive.
The next line,
But-
we're all gonna fight.
The
The next line where I
moment.
embarrassed myself in front of 30 people.
No. Shh. There's you keep to your stance yet, but the thing here is he mentioned reflections. We can get ether from other reflections, and that's the key thing to me. That it's like, okay, we fucked up because it means they already done that to other reflections,
We know that though.
which means
We know that.
yeah, but now that's more like a confirmation. Like we already kind of like had that
They already
in
more
Queen
than confirmed
Eternal,
that.
in Queen Eternal's trial with looking at the worlds and all that and all that stuff. But it means that if, let's say, that the rejoinings were something that it was needed for the planet to not rot and crumble apart, because it may imagine it as wounds open on the planet's reality. Ether may be bleeding out. If it's like a live organism in a sense, right? And this patch with the Arcadian in particular, where they were talking about how an organism naturally tries to regenerate itself, right? So if that's the case, and in order to reality to not crumble apart and rot into nothing, the rejoinings were needed right now. If they've eaten the other shards, we're fucked. Like, we are fucked in so many levels.
So there's a lot of evidence during Spheen's fight that the 11th was attacked by Alexandria before they came to the source. Because they already had a process in place to extract ether when they got to the source, meaning they've already done it. This
Yes.
isn't some experiment that they're trying out before. And
Right.
we know that they were reaching out across the rift to siphon the life from the Yakhoi when they went to Zaktaral. So
I mean, it doesn't have to be the 11th, but the fact that they showed locations from 11 in Queen Eternal.
Yeah, that's
Ground.
and I was
It's-
hesitant to assign a shard to it specifically.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
I mean, just to use X shard, maybe the 11th, but because it shows backgrounds from 11. What was it? Bastok, the
yeah,
name?
Bastok. Yeah,
That's it, Bastok. Okay, and then I think there's another place which is the windy one that I don't actually remember
Windhurst.
the name of. I think it's like, no. There's like a glacier mountain rift in the wind background facing the fight. That I know it has a name. I think it's where Castle Sval, the one for the Shadow Lord, is located. But don't. This is why we should get Aeneas here and Arden, because right now I feel like I'm embarrassing myself. Like,
AC Gears says the connection made between shards before was not a two-way door. Basically, it's just a one-way, a scene with the void. So it just isn't really something that
But there
maintains.
exists-
So it's not a stable connection.
but there's these planar fissures, so it's like when people say when people are like, no, only the Asians could have told it first. The Asians don't actually share this knowledge precisely with everyone, like, and in fact, only when, if I recall correctly, only when Ardbert and his pals have fucked the first is when Elidibus came to them and
No, they only really share it when their first option isn't enough to kind of push that reflection's catalyst over the edge. And then they have to kind of push harder, and they'd have to maybe reveal a few pieces of information about their agenda, so that they can get the ball rolling a little bit faster.
What I think would be smart from a storytelling perspective, because there's every possibility that Alexandria's already been to the remaining shards minus the 1st and 13th and sucked them all dry, and they're all dead and there's nothing there, which would be really freaking stupid, because it really limits Square's ability to
Not
do
really.
storytelling there. No, it is.
I do have to AC here. The Queen Eternal fight showed what he interpreted as specific locations in other worlds, not necessarily the state of them.
Yeah, no, I agree
and
with
not
that.
count the EX fit. So yeah, it's just to show what exactly they visited, where exactly they visited, not what's going on there presently.
There aren't pieces of Bastock floating around on some other shard.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's the visions of what they saw, where they went.
Right. But what I would like to see is, yes, they went to another shard. They did a very localized attack, enough to alert the shard that there are other reflections, that they are hostile, and to see that shard kind of take up a very belligerently defensive stance. So if we were to ever go, they would automatically assume that we are invading and immediately attack us. I think that would be a great storytelling element.
Could, but I'm not convinced. I personally am not convinced about. But anyways, it's.
I'm just saying, as a hypothetical from a
You're in your madcap.
Yeah.
Madcap element.
I am. But I mean, 2.5, 3 years ago, I was in my madcap element when I said that I wanted to see a shard get really technologically advanced and start invading other shards, and here we are. So.
Yeah.
Well, you got it twice, because the 13th tried to invade the source, and now.
Yeah, but that wasn't through
whatever shard is-
technology.
No,
No,
he wanted a straight up Blade Runner scenario.
Which we got. I'm super happy about that.
In fact, now that you mention, aside from conclusions, but the scenario you mentioned, that it may be that they have gone to all the intact quote-unquote shards, except for the 1st and the 13th, and now they're attacking the source, basically. They latch into the source. And I wonder if it may have to be with the fact that the 13th is void consume and the 1st is nearly light consume. So maybe it's not that much that they can absorb from them.
I mean, honestly, it would be doing either one of them a favor. If they just go to the 1st or the 13th and suck up all the dark and light, and they'd be like, great, we can power the endless and we save the world. Say thank you.
But
So,
regardless,
yeah.
it's the thing with the shards is, like, you know my opinion. The whole about, oh, shard traveling, that's a red herring, because we already did that in Shadowbringers. We are back in Shadowbringers.
We've been doing that since ARR.
We have been.
And again, I don't think that if they discard the shards, it necessarily has to be discard the content, because with the Vanadiel raids, we're introduced to the Walk of Echoes. So regardless where we go, if there's a record that we can visit of things that happen in the past of the world, like the memory of the world in the Walk of Echoes, we could go anywhere. We could visit the shards in the future. We could go
Until that happens.
But I'm not saying it's for this story arc. I would say that this is much more like onwards, and be like, oh, we need content. We go to the Walk of Echoes and pull out Final Fantasy 11. That's basically how we see it, anyways.
Okay, go to the next slide.
All right. There we go. All right. So I know
We could give this chance to devolve not only to the people of the Ninth, but of those of the Source as well. I see no reason why you should reject such a boon. When he said that, I had a huge... My heart kind of sank a little bit because I attended Gateway Fate last year. We had a room full of people. I don't know if any of you were there or not. I got on the mic and asked everyone what if they thought that the interview that was done, if anyone still thought that Alexandria was from the 12th or not. And it was only me and Cobb who raised their hands.
Yep.
And so I then asked, how many of you think it's from the 9th, like the interview stated? And everyone else raised their hands. It was a room full of raised hands. So I was like, ah, oh, great. So now we get to hear. Now we give this chance to not only people of the 9th. I wanted him to just kind of go into, okay, the 9th was the first that we visited on our conquest. I really wanted him to go into that, but he didn't. So that kind of was just like...
It's left hanging.
Yeah, what I wanted...
It's left hanging.
And how I was rationalizing it if they were from the 9th was, okay, they started on the 12th, they hopped to the 9th, attacked the 9th, and from there went to the source. But here, this specifically states that they are originating from the 9th. So,
not really, because he says you could help the people of the 9th, but
it's a seesaw statement.
Come from it.
It's a seesaw statement because he's rationalized. He's trying to rationalize that giving his option will not only help the people of the 9th, but people of the source, which means, okay, this shard will benefit from this, and your source will benefit from this too. Why reject it?
Mm-hmm.
If you realize as well, when he drops the thing about the 9th, and the 9th, sorry, I'm like stuck on my own pronunciation. If you realize it's so glossed over, like there's no relevance at all at this drop, it doesn't matter. Which it's what brings me to Yoshi P and the interview and how he dropped that, and it didn't matter. If it was something really groundbreaking, that's something that they wouldn't have said.
It is a kind of a gloss over. It isn't exactly a stated, okay, yeah, we are from this shard. Mm-hmm. He states that we could give this option to the citizens of the 9th, not we could give this option to the citizens of our star.
I just imagine they landed on the 9th, and just kind of how on the source they've got people who are part of Alexandria that are from the source now. They've got like 30 people who are from the 9th in Alexandria, and they're saying, okay, we're going to give this chance to these 30... Okay, let's say 50 for argument's sake. That's why there's only 50 slots available. We're only going to make 50 people endless. It's only going to be people from the 9th and not anyone from our original shard. This is just me being facetious and stupid.
No, it is both of us. It is both of us high on copium, is what it is.
No, it's not. They're not from the 12th. Like, as soon as he said this line, based on my own...
there is a little part in me that is still holding on.
I will
argue. This is all but confirmed.
Yeah, this for me was an absolute confirmation. No, I don't believe the interview with Yoshi P was a confirmation, but because this is in the game, this is a character in the game saying this, for me, this is hard confirmation that this is now the 9th. And so my question then goes from, trying to copium and saying, okay, well, maybe they associated with the 9th, but they're actually from the 12th, blah, blah, blah. That's just copium at this point. For me, I now shift from that to, okay, how? How and why?
Also, I don't discard anything myself, like having this is a good, solid stance to a degree, because with Don't Tell, the main point of Don't Tell is don't believe what you're told. And I don't have to believe Calix when what he's telling me, because he's my enemy. Why I should believe this guy, But aside from that, the thing is, do my research, and there's also the fact that Yoshi P, right after Dawntrail, the thing in his interview that when he was asked this same question, which shard Alexandria came from, and he, in that moment, directed us to Encyclopedia Ursia, and the thing is that is in Encyclopedia Ursia is the Calamity of Lightning, right? So it's not just that. I then afterwards, you know me, and I do research into symbols and names and numbers, and I keep finding like the reference to Alexandria Final Fantasy 9, but I keep finding Living Memory, Everkeep, names of gear sets, all of it keeps tracing to number 12, and I'm like, this I don't know what it is. I know that there's something about the 12 that is, this is the 9, there's something about the 12 that has to do with them. I don't know what, but I just know that there has to be a tie. Because there can't be coincidence that every single thing I keep researching and finding in references, names, symbols, and stuff, it's number 12. And it's like, we already had the connection with the Calamity of Lightning, so what's going on? Like, in here, I'm thinking Final Fantasy 13 2 and the Paradox Effect. Just a summarized version. When two timelines are due to shenanigans colliding with each other, and there's time fuckery afoot and stuff. It happens the Paradox Effect, which is basically two timelines overlapping in the same place, and it creates a space in which not only time flows differently, but elements from one place and another place in different points of time start overlapping. So I wonder, is this the result of time fuckery that we know that in the alternate timeline they pretty much broke the rules of space-time to try to bring the Warrior of Light back. So is this the result of this action and trying to rewrite the future, or rewrite the past, or rewrite history that has caused like the proverbial butterfly effect, and now timelines are merging, and maybe in the ninth they got emerging and as the Paradox Effect, similar to at least, with the Calamity of Lightning, and that's what is the Storm Surge. It's actually an overlapping of timelines. And seeing the Historia cracks in Zoralja's trial is very much lapidary to me, the way I see it. But this is assuming. I mean, this is all just theory, of course. But knowing the sources, it's like there's something about the 12. Like there has to be something. What it is, I have no idea. But this is coming from 13.2. This is the first thing that comes to my mind. So it's like. Maybe it's the ninth, but that doesn't mean that the 12 is not involved. So it's like, be careful with references, the sources that are telling us this is this and that, and we have to be very careful in Dawntrail. Whom do we trust? So we have to bear that in mind.
Yeah. So I want to explain how. At least how I was rationalizing it being the 12th, and then I do want to address the elements and how the rejoinings were
go ahead.
Basically working. So how we know between the shards there's a lot of time dilation. We know the higher you go, the more extreme or intense the time dilation is. We don't have an exact number for how old the 13th is, but we know it's between 16,000 and 20,000 years old, which is incredible considering the source is 12,000 years old.
It wasn't very developed for being so.
I mean, it was wrecked, but it was destroyed pretty early on. But we know.
I meant that it was very medieval, but.
Right, but it was at that point while basically the source was still hunting and gathering. So there was a lot more advancement in the 13th in that amount of time than there was on the source.
Fair.
So what would have had to have happened was the 12th would have gained ascendancy. It was also a pretty early rejoining. It was with the second one. But it would have had to have jumped away from the 12th prior and then basically taken up root either in the rift or on another shard. And someone in chat said something really interesting where they were saying that it was either still on the 9th or tethered to the 9th etherically and still drawing ether from it to power itself, which I actually really like that idea, because we know that they were siphoning power from the source before they made the jump, but that they needed some other point of energy. So the idea is before the 12th had fallen, they had jumped to the 9th, and then from there jumped to the source. But with this confirmation, of course, they were just on the 9th. They are from the 9th, originating there. What we saw as far as the rejoinings was we saw all the elements, and then we saw an umbrally aspected rejoining with the 7th. Now, starting with the first...
Technically, isn't it astral? Because astral darkness? I think
astral
they call
darkness,
it the astral calamity.
So I'm saying umbral as in its definition of shadow.
Okay.
So darkness aligned elements. And then
me.
starting with the first, seeing light aspected or astrally aligned elements being rejoined. So basically going backwards. This obviously was a failed rejoining. There was not a mere calamity on the source to rejoin it. Had there been, it is incredibly likely that Lindblom's bomb would have triggered that rejoining. But
if it was Lindblom, of course.
Yeah, and it's very interesting to me that there were so many rejoinings ready to go in such a short period of time. Because if you look at the timeline of rejoinings, it's thousands of years between them. And here, we're talking 5 years after the 7th, and the 1st was already ready to go. The 9th, we don't know when this happened. We didn't see any leading indicators like we saw with the 1st of lightning ether bleeding into the source. So I don't know how primed the source was for this. This might be a case of the shard just moving too fast for the Ascians. So, but yeah, I'm just really...
Or just being, again, time fuckery. But...
Right. To me, this was one answer that raised a lot of questions.
It does raise questions, which is the interesting part in this whole thing. That's what... The more questions we have, the more work for us as Lord Divers.
Mm-hmm. The more work for us, and also the more confusing it can get for some people, too. Because you're asking yourself one question and then finding 3 more underneath that rock.
Yeah, but it's part of the fun, at least. but again, it's the thing with the rejoinings. It's I mean, this is where I've been spotting that in this story arc, it seems to, so far in the... Sorry, that's my cat. So far in the first, let's call it Act 1 of 14, right? Mm-hmm. Which is the Highland Zodiac story arc. We had MSQ, and then we had the 2 raid storylines after that. Like, we have the MSQ, and then there's the back support of 2 raids, like the 8-man and the 24-man, right? Mm-hmm. What I'm seeing here is a pattern in which the themes from the raids right now, like we are back in Shadowbringers, thematically speaking. Mm-hmm. The themes from the raids from Shadowbringer, even and near, are coming to MSQ of Dawntrail. So if we're going in this pattern and we're going backwards thematically in expansions, the next one is Omega and Ivalice, and the 9.0 would be Mac and Alexander. So it's like right now the point was basically that if we're heading, because the Nier thing we already have. I mean, you guys both have played Nier. Both of you were like, both of you recognized when the Endless was described with Otis. When Otis was describing the Endless, and both of you were like, "This is the Gestalt project."
Mm-hmm. This is just the Gestalt project, yeah.
So, so aside from that, the other raid we have is Eden, and what is the thing that we do the whole time in Eden? We're basically replicating rejoinings in a, a small scale to restore the emptying. So, though I don't think this is going to go about the story arc about creating rejoinings, because if the shards are eaten, we're fucked. But I do think that this story arc is going to serve us to understand the nature of elements and and some of the mechanics that actually apply to the concept of rejoinings.
That would be awesome.
So that whole thing, I would love that, honestly, because Electrope is such a fascinating topic. I found a phenomenal video about, and I think what actually Electrope is based on, thanks to that video, but that's another story. It's all alchemy and hermeticism. It's fascinating, but a bit abstract right now.
I do want to say I just realized something as I was talking about time dilation, which is that I tend to equate things in the game to real life scientific principles because they tend to use a lot of them in this game. And I realized that light and dark tend to function on time very similarly to gravity. That is to say, not exactly like gravity, but inversely. So the more darkness on a shard, the faster it moves, time-wise. So you've got a lot of darkness on the 13th. That's why it's 20,000 years old compared to the source. The first slowed down quite a bit, but then they infused a lot of darkness into the source with the 7th rejoining, which made things happen a lot faster. So shards were ready much faster, and that's why the time between rejoining shortened so much.
That's true. It's like, but well, darkness is the force of change, chaos, activity, growth.
Time. Yeah, and you need
I
time
don't
for
know
things
if-
to change. So
I don't know if I would say time per se, in a sense.
I mean, it does have an impact on time, I would say.
Yeah, it does. I mean, yeah, because time is a really weird thing. It's this thing that, in a sense, is static, but it's movement. So, if we go into more definitions of time, it's like movement in space what defines time. So it's like, can you really separate time from space? I'm not good at physics, so you're apologize.
So
forgive me
the
if
thing
I
is,
sound like stupid,
time and
but-
space are naturally assumed to be different things, but they're actually two sides of the same thing.
So it's like,
Like if you move through space, you have to move through time. Otherwise, you're already in both spaces.
stuck. We're basically stuck in.
Stuck in time.
I was.
Yeah. Now, if you're unstuck in time, that's a different problem.
Reference.
Yeah. If you're unstuck in time, that's a completely different problem.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's the whole thing, regardless of what it is, this line opens a can of worms in so many aspects.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I mean, we've basically offered pretty much like a platter of different options that we can think of, and then there's what we haven't thought of, which is the truth. So it's like, we try to guess, but again,
We tried our best, and what we guessed at, what we knew as the truth, again, got disproven. Except this time it was through an interview. It was through an interview at first, and then in game.
Meaning Yoshi P spoiled the entire community.
Yes.
or maybe my opinion is that it was not relevant.
I mean, in the grand scheme of things, I don't think
it should be.
I don't think it,
No, I don't
I don't think they think it's that relevant, but it is. And I know at least Banriota is kind of probably on the same wavelength where, yeah, this is a big deal.
I mean, compared with what they seem to have planned for us, it's not a big deal, really.
Go to the next slide, please.
Okay. Which, here, right now, we have Sphene the Liar. Because remember, when we meet her, she said, "Oh, I don't know anything about shards and reflections."
True. I mean, she was controlled, but again, don't trail. The lesson: don't trust what you're told.
Yeah, everything that came out of Sven's mouth was a fucking lie.
Well, because in the scene that followed, in the scene that preceded this scene, it was you had two options. One was we won't let you lay a finger on the reflections. We'll stop you, and then the other one was you're aware of the connection between the reflections, and I chose that one just because he threw up that red flag earlier, and then he spoke about the ninth. So I'm like, okay, he's going to give us a little bit more information about why he knows. And I was happy because Sven answered that. Whether she wanted to answer truthfully or wanted to just lie to us, either way, it's a confirmation that they know something in passing about the reflections. So her saying, oh, don't tell me you thought you were the only ones who knew. This is the height of hubris. I mean, we can assume she's telling the truth and they know nothing, but now we've just confirmed if they had a theory that there were other reflections out there, we all confirmed for them right there in the throne room that there are other reflections out there.
But screwing things is what the Warrior of Light does best. So
yeah, Titan has a go-kart.
That too, so, but yeah, fucking up things is what the Warrior of Light does best.
Leviathan had two heads.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, but again, it begs the question because, like, for example, you go to, I mean, the first they have no idea about reflections, but you could argue that the first is the least developed of the shards.
So the only one that really did was the Crystal Exarch, and that's because he had a map of them in the room there.
And because he came from the alternate timeline, which actually from the time the Catman comes from that timeline is, considering our timeline, he came from a future point, like 200 years in the future.
Oh, and for those that didn't know, Encyclopedia Eorzea 3, yes, it does confirm that the room in the Crystal Tower, the floor, that big round circle with those circles inside them, is a map of the reflections.
Yeah, which is a given.
But I think that was pretty much obvious.
Not everyone has the third Encyclopedia Eorzea. We gave one out at Gateway, and a lot of people didn't quite get theirs either on time or weren't able to get it. So.
Oh right, I suppose they ran out of units.
Very quickly.
Oh, okay. But
I'm sure you can look it up online, but still.
Yeah, it was the only way I got, because I think it was in the third volume that they gave the chart of the circle of the convocation seats and the epithets for each one, which, by the way, one day I will have to go on that, because a certain epithet in there made me freak out. Yeah. Like, how the fuck?
So,
freaking out about this.
I think this is really interesting.
Yeah.
How they talk about, they know about different shards, and it occurs to me that they travel, or at least target shards, very differently than we do. So when the Crystal Exarch went to the first, it was very targeted. They can specifically target where the shard is. I don't think that Alexandria is that precise. I think they just target shards by density of ether, and that's why they came to the source. So
I would say so too. I think they just kind of do a scan of which one has the most ether available and then go directly to it.
Right.
Maybe that's why they ignore the 13th and the 1st. We're like,
they're not dense enough. So they see a very dense, concentrated pocket of ether, target that.
There's not enough oil in those shards.
That's right.
Shut up.
Freedom.
There's oil in them there hills.
Shut up.
Hang on.
So. Anyways, moving on to the next slide before Meowth does something worse.
Yep. And Sven's opinion doesn't matter because their plan is already in motion. Wah ha ha ha. This was mustache twirling line.
For the seeds we saw have already quickened. The last time someone said that to us, it was La Habrea.
And here they give away their whole plan. They are using fear of death, whereas Elidibus used hope to get the people of the Crystarium to basically abandon their jobs and try and collapse society. Here they're using fear of death.
It was a very Final Fantasy IX quote.
To be honest, Elidibus, just to make the point, Elidibus uses hope, quote unquote, because the modus operandi, I will have to replay 5.2, it's been a minute. But as far as I recall, 5.2, no, he explains actually this better in 5.3. But since I used to skip the cutscenes with the Catman. But the thing is that Elidibus mentions that what he told the Warriors of Light to quote-unquote use them is what he quotes to be the modus operandi of, well, he voices it Heidelin and her followers and the Light. But it was basically, Elidibus' modus operandi was replicating or taking or using the same weapons that they were used against them in their favor, which is very, very intelligent on their part, to be honest. But just to point out that the use of hope as a weapon, Elidibus mentions to be the thing that it was used against them, and they picked up on that and were like, we're going to turn this in our favor, basically. Because the whole point of 5.3 is, like at the very start of the patch, is discussing how messed up was the association with the Warrior of Light and Light with good and Dark with evil, and how it affected the Assassins. That was the first quest in that patch.
Right. I like this because it asserts that Sven is not exactly a prominent, one of the prominent figures in Calyx's grand scheme, but just really a pawn, like Sven mentioned earlier. Her role came to an end with this. She did what she had to, and whatever roles are suited for her in the future are mainly irrelevant, as she is just, again, one of his pawns to further his experiments.
Yep.
So what happens to her from now on, whether she appears or whether she just kind of fades into the background, it remains to be seen. But I really like this, how she will either be phased out or she will continue in a lesser capacity.
Right.
What strikes me from this, it's like how willfully willing.
And when I say lesser capacity, it's not that I hate her. It's that
no.
her role. I loved her role in Calyx's scheme of things. So I can't wait to see what else or who else he is using to advance his schemes.
I mean, it could just be that her role, like the simulant role here, is over in the form of Sven, but that doesn't mean that Calyx can bring up next patch, for example.
Right.
As usually the third patch is the quote unquote conclusion of the main core story.
Who else does he have prepped and ready to stop us or continue his experiments? Right. Like the first one was Sven, so now we know.
So what strikes me here is her willful happiness at, my role is end, I fulfill my role as a pawn, I'm bowing out, it's alright. To me, it's disturbing. It's like this willfulness to be a pawn, be used and be discarded. It's so...
It's literally what either a hologram or an android does. It's my creator willed this onto me, I served my role faithfully. Now I will shut down.
Yeah. There's, but again, the themes of this story arc are very related to machinery and robotics and stuff. So it's really interesting to have these things treat and like explored, But still, it's like you see someone looking like a human. In fact, you have the basis for this person like by your side, and you see how different and how strong-willed she is, and here's the strength, and you have this, and to me, it's like this recreation is such a parody, perversion, and corruption of the real Sphinx. Even the first AI Sphinx, and she was implied to have to retain some more strong aspects of the blueprint, which is the real Sphinx. So It's like, it's really creepy. It's uncanny.
It is.
Uncanny valley.
Next slide.
Okay. Yeah, this is... I love this. As a token of gratitude for consenting to my test. None of which actually happened. I leave you with a gift.
We had... No, we had several tests. We had the dungeon, and then we had Beatrix.
Yeah, but we consented to none of it.
No, but he doesn't care. Calix and the simulant more than once have a distinct methodology.
I had to take a picture of that shot. That condescending just stare at us.
I love it. And we get the crown, which to me, this tells me that real Sphinx is going to survive regardless of how inconvenient it's going to be.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, because the crown can mean many things. Like, it's a symbol. I'm not going to go into symbology, but it's a really complicated symbol to dissect in regards, in particular, with the story of Azum. And
It's...
because Sphinx in many ways represents Azum. I'm not going to go into how in a live session.
Yeah.
But
when it all boils down to it, that crown is a regulator. It's a special type of regulator.
Mm-hmm.
What remains to be seen is whether Sphinx will continue to use it or not. Like, she's now aware of what Alexandrian residents have become, and whether or not they accept her, whether or not they will accept her now instead of the simulant, remains up in the air. As you saw, she got all depressed earlier that things have changed so much over the years. She's afraid that she won't be able to reintegrate into her society again. So for her to pick back up that crown, and then maybe one day say, okay, hi, I'm back. That remains to be seen.
June brings up a very, very good comparison in chat. It functions a lot like Nidhogg's eye functioned exactly like this for Nidhogg.
Yeah.
It was a natural regulator. I didn't even consider that, but that's absolutely correct.
Nidhogg's eye, yeah.
The thing with the crown is that Calix left us with it, and that means that this thing is likely going to be a problem.
I would say the hardest to beat is Nidhogg's Eye 2.0, but that's another story altogether.
It's Ayumi. It's a whole story of Foresights, if you think about it.
I know we gotta get that that video out.
I would say that by giving us the crown, it means he doesn't need it anymore, which means he's going into his end game.
I'll say it's phase 2.
Yeah,
but I still think it's a poison gift, and let's see how it goes.
Kind of like how he did the Neo regulators, in that he can manipulate them to different end, rather than the regular regulators, where he just had minimal control, where he kind of farmed ether for the most part. Now with the Neo regulators, it's a step above what he was really doing, where he can pretty much mind control them.
Right.
but nevertheless, again, I'm not sure if I'm leaning into doubting that Sphene is going to survive this story. In fact, I'm not sure if she's going to go past 7.3.
See,
Uh,
I think it would be
But,
convenient for the story for her to die, but I can see how they could have her live, where Gululja is still de facto or like technically ruler, but Sphene
Yeah,
would be like
that's
his
the
advisor.
thing. Nah, it could be,
'Cause-
but
'cause
still,
he
I'm not
doesn't-
sure because considering certain aspects of her character.
The thing is, Wuklamot cannot stay here forever, and Wuklamot's been the one who's been
No.
advising Gululja, so I see Sphene moving into that role.
Could be, but I mean, it could be, but I'm not sure where it's going to be, where things are going to be, because summarized. I see many things from Sphene that indicate, like from X-Trials references and stuff, that make me suspect really hard that she is a shard of Asm. And laugh if you want, but if she actually comes from the Ninth, it's another soul shard for us,
I hope
and we
not.
already have the Golbez one.
Everyone is a shard of everyone.
I
But-
hate the Asm. Like, let's meet our shard on every shard. I hate it.
I don't like the.
Because that feeds
All right,
into
Meowth.
you know what.
You're gonna hate me for this. All right, are you ready? Are you ready? I don't believe we should chase the Asm theories. I don't believe we should chase the Asm shards. I don't believe that we should chase the Emmet theories. I believe that storyline is buried, done, and over with. I believe the ancients are gone and done. Over. We're done with them. We can imagine them. We can harken back to them as a good storyline, but we are truly done with them. We are moving forward with a new storyline. That's it. We have the Asm crystal. It's the story of our lineage. That's all.
Yeah, I agree with the ancients and leaving Emmet. In the past, I don't think they're coming back. I don't think we're done with Azem. I think that's really what we're moving into now is Azem's story. I don't like
And
the
I
idea of
don't-
us chasing Azem shards.
Yeah, I don't think that we're going to just keep going, okay, we're going to visit this reflection. He's a shard of this person. He's a shard of this person. She's a shard of us.
Yeah, 'cause-
she's a shard of us.
Realistically speaking, not all of the shards of everyone should be alive on the reflections at the same time.
No,
And
there are
that's when
similarities. That's it.
That's when I say that. That's when I say that I can back up my claims with really, with solid evidence. But I'm not going to ever. Naturally, not going to dissect that on any live episode. Just I'm going to say that I have good reasons to assert that we're going down this path. But again, like I always say. Only
And I will be
time
there
can
to
tell.
feed you crow.
But if I'm correct, I'm going to enjoy you eat the crow. The crow. So, so it's alright. Like if you right now don't see it, I mean.
That's correct, June. You can do the Asm story without having to do Asm Shard Avengers, which, whew, if they do the second option, I don't know how much of the Asm Shard Avengers I can take.
The only
I mean,
way I see Sphene Asm working out is if Sphene dies. And then it's a matter of we have to take her soul into us or to basically save her. And I hate that. I really hate that. I don't think it works for the story. I don't think it works for the character.
Depends, because there's a lot of things in there, but I would have to
But,
go into
I mean,
into things.
I'm not saying
and
Yeah, I'm not saying it can't happen. This story has done a lot of things that I don't want. But, you know.
we are here for the ride. When it
Yeah,
is something
exactly.
that you don't like, you just be like, okay, I
You just
would
accept
have
it
done
and move on.
something different.
Yeah.
But
Yep,
my point is that right now I'm not saying that isn't necessarily something that I want to happen. It's just that I do my research and I take notes, and this is where I see things going. I'm not going to elaborate on everything because we would be here for days, but just know that there's like a solid reasoning behind all of this. Is months of
Go to the next slide because there is still a lot we need to cover,
Yep.
including the attack.
Let's see. Then preservation's objective is indeed what Calyx claimed. Yeah. Kryl sums up exactly how I feel right here. Raises a lot of questions.
Yeah.
So, we've already addressed most of those.
And there's where Kryl says to say theirs is the 9th.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yep. Could we take a look around here first? Curious about the area over by the throne. This type of regulator,
Shale
which we
keeping
already
the MSQ on point.
Yeah, we already knew. Endless Fiend.
The throne room, the throne room, by the way, is loaded with symbols and references. Just so you know, I'm not going to go over. I went over them in my playthrough of the patch, which is recorded in our channel. But I spent easily 40 minutes going over that room.
You have a channel.
As long as TR's in our keeping, we shouldn't
you
have to
guys
deal with
upload your runs in the LoreLines channel. Why I can't?
Strange that he would abandon it. But again, he doesn't really need the simulant much beyond this next part. She already played her role. Yeah. Or Calyx made a copy of the memories, which is most likely there. He doesn't need the regulator anymore.
Right.
The problem is what are we going to find in there? That's another different sort of Pandora's jar.
That's also a big question. Max Raid says there's also the question of what Azem was doing during the final days. Yeah, looking for a third option. I don't know. I think one day we'll get that addressed, but I kind of don't want to know. The more we learn about Azem, the less I want to know.
I have an answer for that, but not an answer I can go publicly on it.
Yeah. I'm waiting for this fiend to just put the crown on her head, the regulator crown,
and see everything go to shit.
Well, once Calyx is dealt with, I think we'll see that, but not until then. Yep. Intersection of the castle served as residential area. Outer section was added when they expanded the structure. I expect the system to dry the earth was installed so that they could build a stable foundation on submerged land. And there it is, what we had talked about last time, the big turbines. And that whole system was to dry everything out.
Tetsu brings up an interesting point, and we mentioned that during my run of it. It's recorded that Shale was acting suspicious there. So, and judging by what happens next in the whole mayhem at Everkeep, in which a big part of it is that you can't anticipate which android is going to attack you, and every one of them, right for now they're just robots, but what if concerning the regulators and stuff, what next step is you can't trust who the people next to you until they attack you, and you don't know where to trust. And it's giving me this sense of paranoia, because the thing about the cyborgs there is meant to induce that feeling of I don't know when I'm safe or not. If the next step is doing that with living beings around you, possibly friends, possibly just people you go over next to the streets, that's a major feeling of paranoia. And it could well be that we have people infiltrated posing as friends. So it's a really, really, really messed up situation of not trusting anyone.
Here we went over We're just talking with our scions and seeing how they're doing.
Yep. Ishtal was talking with the
With
the
Gassan.
ushers, yeah.
Cure for Levin sickness.
Which we knew what the cure was. I'm glad they finally implemented it. And I'm glad it took them this long to do it. It really makes it feel like, okay, there was a passage of time that happened here. Let's see. How Simulant was able to win them over. Yeah, and that's basically what the Simulant was for, was to provide a symbol for the people to rally around and trust.
June says, what? It wasn't there until Calix left it there. She walked up to the throne because the terminal's behind it.
Yeah. I don't know. I didn't see any problem with Shale during that scene. I think Shale...
I mean, it may be a vibe, but just noting in case it's more than a vibe.
Yeah,
in case.
I don't know. I think Shale was just moving the story along, so it may have seemed like she knew more than she should have known, but I really don't see any issue with it. I think Shale's pretty much in our corner, locked in.
Well, as usual, at this point we can only say time will tell and see if we're right or wrong.
So here we're distributing the cure for Levin sickness to the population. Yeah, Milos.
I love how our cure for most things when it relates to Aether-related sickness is to throw a Porksy Band-Aid at it.
Let's see, Aaronville. What people remember about the Queen's Fiend's death. So the memories were altered if they were wearing a regulator, and they thought it was just
about
a memorial to the people who died during the attack.
About the debate in the chat about rejoinings, which I don't think we're going to be seeing any rejoining because, well,
I mean, I had always...
If they ate the shards, it's discarded and we're likely fucked. But
yeah,
I
wanted to see a natural rejoining. Basically, something that had already been set into motion that is now threatening to tip, even though there's no real Asian involvement anymore.
The thing with the elements here, I always have to bring that up because how should I put this? There's a lot of evolution lore in here. It's a statement. It was already a statement to use that when they chose to use the Science of Light names in evolution lore for the Asians, which means that there's a lot of evolution lore in here. And in Ivalice, there is confirmed 13 elements, and it matches with the number of shards that we have. So
that's the thing with like.
So the thing with evolution elements is that this is a topic that we should actually make a script for, because it's a really interesting one. The thing with evolution elements is that there is 6 elements that you could consider material. Then you would have the polarities, which is light and darkness in this verse. And then there's what we could call the unseen elements, which are more abstract, things that you can't see. Ether, gravity, death, soul, poison. So this is very interesting as to people are stuck on the material elements, but actually in the wheel, if you pay attention to the wheel, you can sort of spot the rest of the elements depicted, the unseen elements depicted on the elemental wheel. This is a topic that we should actually at some point make a script for.
See, and I had a wild speculation at one point that they would use all 13, and that it takes all 13 to actually save the star itself, because you need certain elements. You need poison, you need holy, you need aether, you need darkness, this and that, in order to reform a world completely in whole. So that was my understanding at first, and
yes, that's the dark in evolution lore. Because that's actually taken from evolution lore. Because remember the elemental wheel.
That was my speculation, and that was a speculation that had carried However, in 14, that is not how things work.
Mm-hmm.
And for the most part, people can agree that you can double up on the elements, such as, okay, these two reflections have an elemental ascendance in lightning, these two have an elemental ascendance in water, so on and so forth, and that's how things work. So
Yeah. Now, I do want to address Tetsu's comment that we've used up all 6 elements once, but there are not enough shards to rejoin 6 elements once more. The reason being, we've already rejoined 7. One of those was darkness. The first was going to be rejoined with light. And then we have the 13th, which couldn't be rejoined, and the source. So that only leaves 4 that would be rejoined after that using elements.
Correct. It doesn't match. The only way it actually matches is with the evolution element aspect of it. But again, because using the Asians, the science of light, is basically using the elemental chart of Ivalice, because each one of the Lucavi and the two Lucavi for each one, it represents one of the 13 elements of evolution lore. So that's already kind of like a statement. But again, since I don't think we're going to go into rejoiners because we ruined that. I think there may be references, maybe they're brought up this story arc because this story arc is dealing with the unseen things. It's basically centered around death and the need for death. So it's like because our enemies are trying to plot eternal life. So yeah, it just so death is so related to the unseen, making it into the unseen elements of Ivalice. It's so interesting as a possibility since we're dealing with elements and elemental theory. Maybe they bring that up at some point. It would be really interesting. But it's a topic that maybe we should touch upon some script in the future.
Yeah, but not today.
Not today.
I mean, yes, now Tetsu, but the Asians had considered the 13th lost. We're the ones that have initiated saving it. Let's see, okay. Sven wants to watch me lost
Let's
grow.
see how that goes, but
Yeah. Sven saying she doesn't agree with Calyx or preservation. And here, the panic. There are no more neo-regulators. If you didn't get one, you're going to die.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is specifically to incite panic. The evolution of our kind is at hand. You're not included, basically. So this is specifically to incite panic and fear in the population.
Not just that, it's also creating rifts and divide and conquer.
Oh, look.
Because you're setting apart those who are being chosen and those who have not. And
Correct.
the people who have not chosen and not saved are going to rage against those who have been chosen and being privileged and special.
But
it's
so it's one, turning people against each other, but two, also it's putting pressure on the warrior of light from the population to hand over the key so that everyone can be saved, so that everyone can feel like we have a chance
so messed
at
up,
evolution.
but I love it.
No, it's great. I love this.
Hey, Meowth, look, there's another Tactics Ogre fan in chat.
But the dark, going into evolution lore is fascinating. But the dark itself in evolution lore is the source of magic. But in Tactics Ogre is different. It's a bit different. It's evolution, but at the same time not exactly evolution. I'm not sure how Ayumi may I don't know what Ayumi's stance is on this, but I'm not sure how you would consider the setting of Tactics Ogre part of
it. It's a bit different, but the same, but not. It is complicated.
It's much easier to tie Vagrant story to Ivalice, which is Ivalice, than Tactics Ogre, which could be, but just to separate things.
to be fair, it's made by the same developer.
I mean, yeah. But...
I mean, there's no more. Well, don't you feel okay? And here we see the animosity starting to develop between the haves and haves-nots.
Yeah.
Like I
war,
said
basically.
earlier, there's a Vera outside the Arcadian that had that says the same thing. Her friends and family were all upset that she got a
got
near
one.
regulator,
Yep.
and that she was
and it's
having doubts about getting it.
And it's
Yeah.
driving not just the citizenry but families apart. Let's see what
And
it develops into.
I think this animosity between each other it's not been directed yet. And
No.
once the random attacks start happening, I think Calyx is going to give direction and say, hey, look, the Warrior of Light has the solution, and they won't hand it over.
Right. Right. Hey, with this thing, we could actually create endless for everyone and be
Yeah.
like.
But you know what?
I mean,
The Warrior of Light doesn't want that. They want you to die. Yeah, people having PTSD and not knowing how to deal with it.
Yeah.
I love this Sphene pathetic look. Someone needs to just caption that. Just take out the chat bubble and just put pathetic.
It's the evolution. It's the evolution of Lahabre's pathetic.
Right. Yes, exactly. Yep, and that's what she meant by the scenes being so Novardi quick and the fear they have implanted in people. And it's not a hope of transcending death; it's a fear of death.
When you
Yep. The terror
when
of
you mentioned the whole thing about jealousy, which is a big thing, it's such a fascinating negative emotion to feel, because it's like when something good happens, and it's so different. Like in ancient society, other people would get something good, and the people would support and be happy for them, right? They support each other. But here, what we're seeing is jealousy happening, that something good happens to others, and you want that thing for yourself, and you want them to lose it.
1800s France would disagree with you.
Don't get me started on the French Revolution.
But yeah, so here, I think it's really, really funny. Sphene says the terror of their first encounter with death still lingers in their hearts. It reminds me of that meme from Buster Scruggs, where the guy's at the gallows getting hung, and he's like, first time?
I've used that meme so much.
It's a great meme.
But I will just point out that you guys were saying earlier about, no, but this story arc is not about what you think. This is death. This whole story is about death.
Right.
And they made this patch. They were making direct references to a certain someone. So this whole thing goes really deep. Though, before making any statement, I'm waiting to see what happens in 7.3. To me, this patch confirmed many things, but to me, so.
Yep, they don't know how to handle it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they've never been allowed to really experience through the grief.
They haven't had to. They've always had a quote-unquote alternative. Saying, well, you could die, or you could become an endless. But now that dastardly Warrior of Light wants to keep you from becoming an endless. And now everybody's dying.
You can die or become an endless, and it's like, mate, when you become an endless, you die. You do realize that, don't you?
Yeah, but the way it's presented, they don't see it that way.
Yeah. Again, illusions and lies and illusions.
And this is very reminiscent, actually, of the Final Days, and what happened to the Ancients, where they couldn't accept their new reality and leaned on Zodiark. So here, the endless system is kind of not a stand-in for Zodiark, but it's kind of analogous to it. And this is kind of the same thing we saw. So if Vanal were here, she would sunder the knife. Because clearly that's the answer. Instead of actually dealing with this like she should have done in the first place.
The answer was clearly strolling through the streets of Hammered, seeing people die next to you, and look away because that's their fate. So yeah, I have opinions.
I mean, we kind of do that here too, but what I mean is the solution here is not to destroy their society.
No.
Yep. Which I don't know. Maybe that was just an ancient reaction. And Maxerade says, to be fair, death has been the theme of most Final Fantasy games since 10 or since 7, especially in 10 and 11 and 13.
In 11? Well, I mean,
Yeah, with Rikazma.
13 is about death. That's
Yeah.
the thing. The whole thing about Fauna Orchestralis is death, but not death understood as a bad thing. Like in 9, for example, you have the theme of death, but it's explored from the scope of the fear of death, like Vivi, Kuja. Well, you haven't played, but if anyone in chat has played, it's in fact the final boss is the manifestation of the fear of death, which is why
And 9, yeah.
some people have been speculating, and I think they may be right, that this is going to end up manifesting in some form, some incarnation of the fear of death, like Necron was. So Final Fantasy X is also a big influence in Dawntrail. It's one of the two main noticeable influences in Dawntrail, like Macadamia Forest and all that stuff.
Macadamia Forest from Mamukas.
Mac-
I know it's Macalania. I call it Macadamia.
I'm not an expert in 10, but I do know that there's the whole thing about the cycle and death, but I don't know exactly how it's explored. Maybe you guys have better insights into it. But I do know that in 13, the theme of death is death explored in its positive way, which is what we are right now incarnating against this promise of eternal life, which is actually, well, smoke and mirrors, as to quote Final Fantasy 13. But that's the point of Final Fantasy 13 and Fabulum Crystallis. It's understanding death as the thing that makes us human.
Right.
And makes us mortal but human, and as the source of love and the bonds that unite us. So this whole thing, especially when you see Caldex being so emotionless, it was one of the big red flags to me. Like, these people are trying to erase death, and that means that by extension they're going to erase love, because that's what 13 is about. Death is the source of love. So it's 13 explores death in a way that no other Final Fantasy does. That much is certain. I wonder if it may be the reason for why it's not understood, and Dawntrail is going the same way so far. I swear that there's a curse place on Pablo Stars, honestly. But anyways.
So, I think Sven is a little bit incorrect here. Fear of death continues to spread among the people. I think fear of death is kind of inherent already. It's just being amplified. Gifts for our friends will have to wait. Broadcast had us worried, blah, blah, blah. Everyone's still out there. We have a situation. And here, this, I liked that it wasn't just, okay, we're turning the military on everyone. The mechanical soldiers are turning against the population. It's very random. And it's one, maybe two. It's not something that is...
And you can't recognize them.
Right. And so it destroys trust, basically.
Yes. Bonds.
See. Yeah, so the sentries shot each other. Only someone with the King's Resolve's authority could order a soldier to do that, except for preservation, of course, which is who is actually running.
They set that
Alexandria.
protocol in place.
Right.
They set the protocol in place.
Which means that they basically usurped Gululja's authority, who is
Right.
as of now, is the rightful king of Alexandria.
Rightful, yes, but not.
I mean,
Not Really?
You get what I mean?
Yeah, because
He
Fiend
all
was
he
a
has is
be.
puppet queen.
all he has is administrator rights. He doesn't have the
Admin
actual
rights.
admin rights.
Yeah. Oh, let's go see for ourselves.
He doesn't have IT rights.
Yep. Yep, more hostile sentries.
That's when they try to jump on Erenville, which is interesting. Anyways, I'm not going to go there.
No body, just a pile of dust.
That
We'll go back.
that thing was like, it was such a red flag to have someone randomly turn into dust, because we're not given the reason. We're not given the reason for why, and it's
Right.
like, I mean, so far that I recall, we're not given the reason. Like, this person turned into dust. Why?
Yep.
And it's like, it just, if you allow me to share, because again, we're in Shadowbringers equivalent content. We come from Shadowbringers directly in Dawntrail. There's one line that
They come from
in
Endwalker and Dawntrail.
story threads. Like
There you go.
The previous expansion the previous expansion was Endwalker, but the story threads come from Shadowbringers, which is creepy because all the things we speculated back in Shadowbringers time that we believed that they had been abandoned in Endwalker are actually all coming back for Dawntrail. That's why it was like, wow, we discussed when Dawntrail released that had we been speculating back then 2 expansions ahead, because it was so. Do you remember that? But there's one line that, again, replay Shadowbringers. Like, do replay Shadowbringers and pay attention to Hades' dialogue, because there's one line here that, with this thing, I don't know if it's correct, but it's stuck in my brain. Like, all you're doing is lengthening your existence by the smallest margins. And I'm like, is this exactly what he was referring to? That we may have won, but we are not going to win on the long term. We may have triumphed over the final days, but because the reality is how it is, and the bodies are sundered, the souls are sundered, and without the stasis of Hydaelyn, is going to all crumble apart.
Max?
Max!
Clearly
it's WCS.
Wow!
Clearly.
Wow!
You- you-
We were mentioning here before.
You activated my PTSD.
Snow in summer.
Violins slowly play in the background.
We talk about Nier. That's the thing.
And here we go. Now it's not just the soldiers, it's the vehicles, it's just random acts of violence is basically what they're instigating. There's no
WCS.
target.
As a side note, if I were to tell Ayumi all the things and symbols I've been pouring on Dawntrail about flowers, he would be like freaking out.
Right. So here we go. The attack. Lots of people getting shot. PTSD reliving itself.
And it's basically making people more and more afraid of death. I don't want to die. This line, by the way, I'm not sure you guys have played Type 0.
Yeah.
The I don't want to die was so reminiscent of Isana at the beginning when he realizes that he's about to die and I don't want to die, and he starts breaking out crying.
Yeah.
Type 0 is a brutal game, but it did
is.
remind me of.
That's another game that's all about death.
Yes. But Type 0 is about death, but specifically about death in war, which is a very different thing.
Yeah. People dying. Sven getting mad.
It's all wrong.
Yeah.
It's all wrong. I freaked out when I read that. I was like, fuck!
Yeah.
It's a, you
Echoes
know,
of Medium.
it's a direct cue thematically speaking, into Endwalker. If you realize,
Yep.
right now, it's if like the thing we mentioned, the expansions in 14 work like every 2 expansions we go back to
Yep.
the one that was like
Yeah, so
2 expansions
Shadowbringers
ago.
goes
So
back to Heaven's Word, and now we're going back to Shadowbringers.
now at in Dawntrail we're 2 expansions back, which is Shadowbringers. 8.0 will go back if we follow this trend
And
into
Endwalker,
Endwalker.
Endwalker went back into Stormblood with Xenos.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's always 2 expansions for a payoff, really.
Yeah.
I
So
just-
the whole thing about the truth of Endwalker, the consequences and stuff, I believe they're going to be explored in 8.0, which
Yeah.
is going to be a nuke, because if it's correct.
I don't understand how the Scions aren't piecing together what the purpose of these attacks are.
Yep.
Like, it's very obvious to me what they're doing here. And they've seen
Yes,
this before, so
but-
they should know better.
I have really strong doubts about the science,
No.
and trusting the science right now.
I loved this line where saying, we should turn off the machines. This is very 13 right here. It reminded me a lot of Carbuncle in 13, where you can't take the Fal'Cie out of society because they're what's holding society up.
They're
You can't
embedded in society.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can't turn off the machines in this society because that's what's keeping society running.
Exactly. And the only solution to solve that thing was to destroy Cocoon.
Yeah.
Even though they don't destroy it exactly by the end, but it works as a destruction. It wrecks. It's in like spoilers. I
They
suppose.
do destroy the society.
They do destroy the society because the theme of 13 is death and change. And to the eyes of the people, the cast of 13, they're basically terrorists.
Absolutely.
But that's the thing. It was the only thing they could do to take the corrupted root away and free the people. They had to destroy their society, basically. And
well, I mean, it was either that or everyone dies. So
yes,
there wasn't really much of a choice. So the machines provide medical treatment and manage food production. So everyone starves if they turn all the machines off. So
that was so 13. That was so 13. I was like,
and that's what I was saying. It reminded me of Carbuncle because Carbuncle produced all the food.
Yeah.
And eventually Pandemonium did that.
Yes.
Hey, keep talking. I'll be back.
And made it so they can't use weapons anymore. Hopefully that makes things a little bit safer.
That's not going to make anything safer.
I mean,
know that.
Yeah. I don't know.
It's not. It's not. They're going to find another way.
I mean,
And besides, if Gulolja's authority is questioned and usurped, likely Calyx is able to, I can just go in here and hijack it and make it work as it was intended.
Well, right, because even if they can't use weapons, there are other means of which you can craft or create a weapon out of something. For instance, let's say, they did it earlier, but using a vehicle to crash into something.
Aside from that, but also the people themselves can be that weapon.
The person themselves, or let's say they have quote unquote an accident with a construction vehicle, like not the construction vehicle like actually hitting something, but like let's say they're working on something and then it suddenly fails and like their stuff falls onto the person. Stuff like that.
It also creates such a sense of paranoia as well, because it means it's like we don't usually realize in our society, and I don't want this to be anyone freaking out.
Final Destination stuff.
But every time we go out to the street, anything can happen, and that can happen in so many small ways, but does that stop us from going out of our homes and do our daily lives? We sort of coexist with death, even though in our society we do have this sort of fear of death in many aspects, because I mean, this is getting a bit into belief systems and
Yep.
cultural stuff, but but we don't, at least in Western society, we don't understand that the same way Eastern society does. Let's leave it at that.
Yeah.
So,
All right, next one.
Shane just reaffirming her beliefs.
You found the words to say.
Yep. And Shane, of course, going to be a white mage.
I would say probably more of like a scholar or a summoner. Arcanist, something like that, yeah.
By the way, Ayumi, was it just me that when she mentioned in one of the offhand dialogues, I know that it's because Garnet is a summoner, and in here, summoners and grimoires are associated with the Arcaniman stuff, right?
Yeah.
But was I the only one who freaked out when she mentioned there's one particular grimoire I want to check? I was like, fuck's sake. Maybe it's not the intended reference, but the moment it hit me in that moment, Tactics Advance.
Mm-hmm.
Like Tactics Advance is all about the grimoires.
I did no, it didn't hit me. No, it's more or less it hit me that she is specialized in using grimoires.
Yeah.
So I
But,
wanted to know like what.
So I was the only one freaking out there. Okay.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And here
But-
we're holding on to
but
the key,
thematically-
which means we're going to be the target in 5.3 of the population, because we can't just, attack the population.
Yep.
Make
We
those-
could.
Yep. And then here we have Calyx being
regardless-
Batman.
Yeah. That closing statement to me is quite loaded.
I was
So-
surprised there
He's
weren't
just-
too many after quest cutscenes in this patch.
He is just being Thanos at this scene. Basically,
pretty much.
he's just kind of going over humanity's evolution for his design. In other words,
Yeah, even though again, this is unsustainable in the long run.
yeah. I was come to pose a new question.
Mm-hmm.
So, what's the question?
Yep.
This is
That's it.
my personal take, okay? My personal take on that question, because in that scene, Calyx is musing about one answer that he's found to eternal life. Because there's two things in the previous cutscene when he's introduced, two things he mentions. One is that humanity needs to evolve into a stage in which flesh is no longer needed, and they can achieve eternal life. And one of the things that he mentions is that progeny is a burden, which to me is a massive red flag. Anything that touches children is like, fuck you.
Well,
Yeah.
the thing is that life, by its very nature, consistently expands endlessly, and eventually will absorb all resources for itself. But
That's why death
yeah.
exists.
Right, exactly.
Why death exists.
But if they're going to overcome death, then they have to destroy life so they can use those resources for the endless, is basically his argument, which is
His
ridiculous.
argument is more like his argument more like, to achieve eternal life we had to achieve a stage of evolution that doesn't require the flesh, because we have to consume
Yeah.
other
and
things.
Mex is
to-
absolutely right. We don't know if his new version of endless, or what he's thinking of for evolving, is the same thing as the endless we met in Living Memory. I would argue that it's not. It would be more like him, who doesn't need Living Memory in order to manifest.
That too, but one of the points here that he says, I've already reached the answer as to how mankind shall evolve.
Well, that's
Right?
just bias.
It's just yeah, but the point that I'm trying to make is that one thing is discard the flesh, achieve eternal life. The other thing that he points out in his introductory cutscene is at the same time as when he's monologuing, at the same time death stalks us and prevents us from achieving the ideal point of evolution, which means that to me there's two ways, and one way that there's the only way you can achieve eternal life, because where there is life, there's inevitably going to be death.
Yep.
It goes hand in hand.
Death is the natural state.
But exactly. But if you want to achieve eternal life, then you have to destroy the concept of death. So I think that the real question he's going to pose, this is my theory, this is my take. The real question, because one of them he's already answered, which is ties with what he said in his introductory cutscene. The next question is erase the concept of death.
Yeah.
That's my take. So let's see what happens in the next patch, and how it develops.
Very excited.
Yes, I'm so excited. It's like, I mean, I was already excited when Dawntrail released, but I feel I've seen more people getting excited back for 14 with this patch, which it's a relief, because we've been these months of doomsaying and hate, and it's like it was getting tired.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
But,
it.
yeah.
That's 7.2. And so
Wait till we get into the Arcadian.
yeah, which is going to be next
Yes,
week. I'm
yes!
excited for Arcadian. There's a lot to talk
Yes!
about there.
Oh, you bet there is. I was like, yeah.
So
Yeah, and so many interesting things, and Arcadian was loaded. In fact, so
it
loaded.
was.
I was screaming too as well. But yeah,
Yep.
But yeah, that'll be next week.
Yep.
And
it took us 3 weeks to go over 7.2.
I know. We were supposed to do Arcadian 2 weeks ago, but here we are.
here we are.
Here we are.
So,
Listen,
all right,
at
everybody.
least we deliver content.
Yeah, right. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us, and Meowth Yumi, thank you for being here. And
As
we'll
always,
see
yes,
everybody
thank you.
again next week to talk about the Arcadian.
Yeah.
Please look forward to it. All right, take care.
Take care, everyone.
See ya.